Welcome to the New England Endurance Podcast. I'm your host, Art Trapotsis, along with my former collegiate rowing adversary, Eric Schenker.
What's up? What's up?
Eric, I'm so excited to tell our audience that this is episode 22, and it's our first episode where we are exclusively talking about rowing.
It's long overdue.
Long overdue.
I mean, we've been hinting at our preference for this sport for quite some time, but excited that we're finally getting into it deep.
And so today we have Ted Benford from Community Rowing in the house. What's up, Ted?
Hey, guys. How you doing?
Community Rowing, Inc., also known as CRI, is located on the Charles River here in Boston, Mass., and was founded in 1985 as the first public boathouse in Boston. That's cool. I didn't know that fun fact.
Beautiful boathouse.
Yes.
I mean, the nicest boathouse in the world, in my opinion.
We're going to get into that.
I like where this is going.
Yeah. This is great. Ted brings more than 30 years of experience as a coach, a business person, administrator, and leader in his role at CRI, into his role as CRI's current executive director. He's coached D1 and D3 programs. He's coached crews to the Royal Henley Regatta in the UK. He's led U.S. rowing under-23 development camps, coached crews that represented the U.S. in the 2007, 2008 World Championships. He's also held leadership roles in Fortune 500 companies, was an associate director of career services at Tufts. I don't know if I'd put that on my resume, but anyway, that's
Go
fine.
Jumbos.
And was a founder of a small business that combined the experience of Olympic rowers with leadership training experiences. It's all very cool. What was not mentioned here is that he was also a coach at the world's finest collegiate institution, Boston College, overlapping with my time there. And Ted, it's great to see you again, and we're really excited to have you on the show.
Oh, thank you, guys. It's an honor to be here. You know, any chance I get to speak about rowing in the Boston community is something I cherish and something I'm really grateful for because the image and the ideals of rowing in Boston is something that the city aligns with and that we all sort of understand, but not many people know much about it. So this is just a great opportunity. So thank you guys very much.
Cool. And this is a great warm-up for us, Eric, because we're going to be at the head of the Charles commentating this year at Reunion Village.
That's right. I've been doing it for about 20 years, the announcing there. And based on the wild, incredible success of this podcast and the millions of users and downloads that we've had, they've invited you also, Art, to another unpaid announcing engagement. So, we'll be there on Saturday of the head of the Charles, and maybe we'll talk a little bit about the head of the Charles later on in the podcast.
Do you say things like, "Hey, 4-seat is hanging at the catch"?
We try. I don't want to give away all my secrets. I would say it's a little bit more disparaging towards, other crews. Sometimes it's quite jovial. I don't think we generally don't commentate on people that are actually racing. But what's fun is that the warm up. You're either warming up and you're heading in our direction, or you're coming back after the race. And that's when we have a little bit more fun. And there's always a fun shout out to a kid, a niece, a nephew. And we accept bribes for food and drinks while we're there. So,
all right, let's get back to Ted here. So Ted, it sounds like you've had a ton of experience in the rowing world. You've been around boats for 20 or 30 years. Yep. Were you yourself a rower?
I rowed in high school for 2 years. I started my junior year. And
where was this?
This was down in Virginia, Northern Virginia. So I went to Langley High School, which is a public school just outside of D.C. A buddy of mine went to McLean High School. And I was a tennis kid and a racket sports guy, and he was a swimmer. And we were both sort of disenfranchised with the varsity sports we were playing. And so he was like, let's try rowing. I got a buddy down at Washington Lee High School. And this was in a very different era when people were taking high school sports a little differently than they are now. And we went down and tried out for the team and made the varsity team at W&L. So that was sort of where it all began. But then in college, I didn't row in college. I played rugby in college. So
I think that might be the first rugby mention on the podcast.
Is that an endurance sport?
Well, generally what we hear is, what brought you to endurance sports? Well, I wasn't that good at soccer, or I wasn't that good at hockey. So
I was.
You were probably a stellar tennis player, but you still chose to.
You know, what's funny is like I actually I really enjoyed coaching tennis. So I competed as a tennis player, but what I really did was spend a lot of my weekends at the tennis place teaching. So I was mentored by a really cool pro, and really enjoyed that part of the game, but sort of lost my interest in competing and wanted to play another really, really intense sport, and rowing
Well,
found
it's
me.
interesting that you were into rowing, then you got into rugby. How did you get back into rowing?
Short story long, my first job out of college was in Pittsburgh, and I didn't know anybody, and my girlfriend broke up with me, and I was just alone in Pittsburgh. I didn't know what to do, so I started to play rugby. At the time, I was in a commercial insurance company that was very buttoned up, and you had to wear a suit to work every day. But coming to work in a sort of environment like that, with a broken ear or a nose that has tape on it, or fingers that were taped together, one day my boss called me into a conference room with HR, and they said, "You can either keep playing games or you can keep your job."
What?
Yeah. And
He said, "Stop playing rugby."
said, "Stop showing up here with tape and broken bones. It's not good for our image." And so,
Insurance company. Isn't there a commercial about that? The chaos guy, where he's
oh my God, I never thought about that. Yeah,
you should sue them. You are the originator
really
of
funny.
of that look.
I got to call them and check out the trademark on that, the copyright rights. And so I started looking for other ways to meet people, and Three Rivers Rowing was just getting started. And so I started rowing, and one thing led to another, and I actually enjoyed, again, sort of the coaching aspect as opposed to rowing. So I started coaching at a local university there, and went from there.
You've had a pretty illustrious rowing coaching career with somewhat little rowing experience, which is kind of interesting, but it sounds like you were always a coach. What is it that you look for in a rower, right? When you were out recruiting, or you were on campus trying to get kids to join the team, because you don't need a ton of experience for a lot of these programs. Mm-hmm. What are the attributes that you look for in a rower, besides handsome and smart, indicative of the two gentlemen across the table from yourself?
Hence the podcast and not a TV show.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm waiting
Touche.
Right. You guys are dashing. So on the collegiate side, for any parents that are listening, I think there's really, college students, whether they're men or women, are pretty simple organisms, right? Like they need to row, they need to study, and they need to take care of themselves. And so what I looked for when I was recruiting athletes, especially at the Division I level, was are they going to thrive in the environment where competition is primary in most of the facets of their life? So being a good student is a competitive thing to do. Being ruthless about how you take care of your body and how you care for the necessities to be a high performer is something that kids especially sometimes let go in the name of training more or other activities that might or might not help them. And then I think the other thing is, just from the standpoint of rowers, there's the sort of the physiology and the sort of the general standards for being either a Division I or a Division III athlete, but those are all pretty well found on the internet. So for me, one of the things that I hated as a recruiter was sort of like, what's it like to row here, or what's it like to, be here? And without swearing on your podcast, I would say it's really freaking hard, and it's hard every day. And I'm not going to make it hard. Your teammates are going to make it hard. And if you're coming here to just make the team, this conversation's over, and say that in front of their parents, and let them all understand, like, it's not a hardo, it's not a heavy duty thing, but it's just, the people that come here are serious about the things that are important to them. And so for us, being strong academically is something that correlates to being strong physically and being a high performer. And if people can't succeed in academics, most of the time, young people are going to have a difficult time succeeding in their teams. Yeah, at least in rowing, that's what I found.
But I'm not making a joke. I'm being serious. But you often hear the GPAs of the rowing teams are always very high. Yeah. And I do think it does require a different mindset of organization and competitiveness and time management to get up at 4:45 in the morning 6 days a week in college and forego all those other things. So I can understand about that mindset. Obviously it's one of the most impactful things in my life was my experience rowing at Boston College, and I'll forever be grateful for that.
Yeah. And I would say the same thing with me at Tufts.
Yeah. I was coaching at MIT for 5 years, and the GPA of the team actually went up when I was coaching there, sort of a source of pride for me, but it went from like a 3.2 to a 3.4. We were able to really synthesize the type of athletes that we wanted to bring by having them focus on the things that are important to be a D1 athlete. At the time, the men's lightweight team at MIT was D1. And so, it's no joke. What you say is true.
Yeah.
And I think it's not the coach enforcement. It's potentially the culture of the sport, which is a toiling and working sport that can be easily translated into how people treat each other. And I think we'll talk about that a little bit later in terms of how other people outside of college can get access to rowing, and what the community is of rowers. But I think for young people especially, it's the idea that there are no superstars, there are no champions without other people, and the day-to-day competition is a unique experience for a young person, which is, I need Eric to push me. Eric might not be on my holiday card list, right? Like might not be best friends, but I need Eric to push me so I be better. And I need to push Eric because if Eric's not in my boat, we're not going to go fast. So I need to be as good as Eric, but Eric needs to push me, and we need to compete every single day to push each other.
I'm getting so fired up right now. I'm about to jump across the table.
Yeah, get going.
Bring me back.
Yeah.
Take me back. Take me back.
There's an old saying. I had this sticker up on my wall in my dorm room. Athletes row, others play games.
Yeah.
Sorry to my fellow cycling buddies out there. Seriously, what are some of the distinctive traits that you think might make a good rower or oarsman?
The most important facets of rowing bring in the concepts that are almost cliched, but are born out in other, and I'll give you some examples, right? Like everybody talks about SEAL teams and high performance military groups where the group is as strong as its weakest link. There's an enormous amount of energy put not on the physical capacity of say, a military group, but the connection that they have as already being those high performers. So, we can talk about sort of, the strongest facets being that, like I said, there are no heroes. The teams are literally linked together by the capacity of what every person brings in every moment. So It's not just being able to throw a football really far, but it's being able to throw a football really far 36 times a minute for 5.5 minutes. And being able to do that with people who self-select and then are also selected. So there's humility there that is unknown in other activities that people sort of, succumb to, right? You have to be part of the process. So that in and of itself is something that it's not just a humble experience, but it's an acceptance experience that people don't even know they're doing, on top of training really, really hard and on top of trying to be as best as they can be in an unrelenting environment.
Yeah, and I think what you mentioned earlier just about taking care of your body. I mean, when you're in college, you're not thinking about getting the right amount of sleep, but it's super important if you got to wake up every day at 4:45 to feed your body right, get the right amount of sleep. Oh, also do your homework and maintain some friendships. So at a very early age, you learn about balance, balancing, your schoolwork, your fitness, and your friendships. And we try to have life balance nowadays, and it's super challenging. But as rowers, you learn that as an early age.
But I would say those lessons that we learned is a natural transition to the endurance. Like I would imagine why we transitioned into this endurance community, and I think I talked about it on the podcast a little bit. But like Dave-O, right?
Sure.
A mutual friend of ours who was a elite national team level rower. Transition to road cycling, had great success after college, and he's the one who first got me on a road bike afterwards. So there's and a lot of those lessons that we learned in college we still today. So I mean, we could have another reminiscing podcast, which I would love to do, but
sure.
we got other topics to dig into here.
Let's move on.
But thanks, Ted. That was an inspiring and a great start. So let's talk about CRI,
okay.
or let's say from heretofore we will refer to it as CRI, but the words the name of it is community rowing. Can you give us the mission of CRI?
So the mission of CRI is to provide people who wouldn't otherwise have the background, experience, or ability the chance to grow through rowing. In 2019, 2020, right before COVID, we changed our mission from people, whether their experience, background, or ability, to gain access to rowing, to the word growth. And so we've really taken the idea of growth in rowing as essential to what role we play in the community of Boston. So,
and what led you to community rowing?
So Eric and I, shared an experience down there when CRI was rowing out of an old MDC, now the DCR hockey rinks.
With no walls. Let's just be clear. It was a roof. So
Yeah,
just to be clear.
It was rugged. But early on when I came to Boston, CRI was where BC was rowing from. And I got involved in CRI. I did a little coaching at CRI. And a member of the community came to me one day and said, "Hey, there's a meeting tomorrow night you need to come to." And I was like, "I'm not going." And she said, No, you actually have to go to this meeting. And so I went, and there were about 15 or 20 people there. And CRI was sort of in a transition period. And she said they were having elections for the board of directors.
What year was this?
1992. And she said, Ted Benford is going to be on the board. So I was like, okay. And everybody say aye, and everybody said aye. Like I couldn't even say no. So I joined the board, and basically the same year that I started coaching at BC.
And what's your current role there?
I'm currently the executive director. I was involved with the board through 96, and then became a trustee. Basically went between business and coaching back and forth between 96 and 2016. And then in 2016, I retired from coaching in 2015. In 2016, I started working there again as the director of operations, and they did a search in 2018 for an executive director, and I've been at ED since 2018.
Excellent.
Good run. So digging in a little bit more to what CRI does, it's our understanding that the Cambridge and Boston public schools are the only major cities in the United States that offer rowing as part of their PE classes. How is CRI involved in that? What I think is an absolutely spectacular, unbelievable, accessible program.
Yeah. So I'm not aware of there's a lot of opportunities, and rowing has been trying really hard. U.S. Rowing and a lot of major rowing organizations around the country, and in Seattle and in Pittsburgh and D.C. and in Boston and New York and Philly, sort of the rowing hubs of the U.S. currently, to try to give people who don't have access to the sport access. And so our approach to that has been to partner with public schools, where we take our coaches, our machines, and our curriculum, which is certified by the state, so that we can basically just go in seamlessly with a PE class and teach young people what we've just been talking about. We're not going to talk about the grit and the endurance and the hard part of rowing, but just the team concepts and some of the most important facets of what hooks people. Certainly, there's the physical side, which is awesome for all of us who are naturally talented athletes. But for a lot of people who love rowing, it's because of what they can do together in a boat that is unspoken. And those are the things that actually bind teams together more than athletic performance, in my view. And so we're bringing that to about 7,500 kids a year in the Boston community. Wow. Yeah, we partner with about 38 Boston public schools and all of the City of Cambridge middle schools to bring rowing into PE classes.
Do you teach other teachers how to do your program, or do they come to your facility?
So our coaches for the program, our coaches go into the schools, but those schools can then come out to CRI and have a field trip. And that's when we try to hook the teachers. It's exactly right. So one of the things we feel is that if we can evangelize rowing, it's through what we know are people who have the greatest influence on young people, who are their mentors. And a PE teacher is someone who has a lot of access to how kids behave in team environments, and also kids who might want to explore it that would never imagine in a million years that they could come down to a boathouse and either look at the turtles or go for a row. And so a big part of what we feel is part of our mission is both for young people and adults is to give them the choice. Like the thing that's crazy about sports right now is they're really coalescing around some really, some singular experiences, even by season. Mm-hmm. And so something that's happening in the city of Boston is that there are a lot of sports-based youth development organizations like ours and others that do just amazing work with kids, to, we all know about these programs that sort of, teach a kid a sport and then give them academic experience or STEM experience. I could riff off probably 5 or 7 right now that are doing just incredible work at a deep dive with kids. The thing is, we want to give those kids a choice, because kids that come from our experiences, and I don't know your backgrounds, but we were able to have a choice about whether we want to row or play tennis or play rugby or ski or do all these things. Kids who are disenfranchised don't have those choices. And so the mission and what we're trying to achieve as an organization isn't to find the next Olympian. That would be amazing. And we are an Olympic training center, by the way. No, we're not. We're a national team training center. But really what we want to do is have a kid come down and pick it. And even giving a child a choice about whether they want to come to the river or not is the first step in a long road that we have in terms of access to sports for kids who are disenfranchised.
Do you see that happening?
Yeah, it is happening. And it's happening incredibly slowly.
Okay.
And so, I sometimes talk about CRIs like the hamburger served, right? Like, yeah, like we serve, like I was talking to my board of directors, like there's 17,000 people come through our organization one way or another in terms of like individual events that they participate in, whether it's rowing or, a corporate row or the school programs. But when we talk about people who don't have access or don't have those choices, and the level of work that's necessary to give those people the chance to come back, that happens on an individual basis. So we do this literally one kid at a time. So the numbers of kids who come down to our organization are pretty impressive. They're quite large, but the intensity with which we focus on making sure that kids who don't have the family structure, don't have the history, don't have the awareness of like what is possible if they stick with it. And then from our perspective, understanding what their needs are, their academic needs, their social needs, there's economic needs, and they're all different by child. And so the work is really around taking this one person at a time right now.
It is awesome. And Art, I think what you'll see when we're at the Head of the Charles in a couple weeks is when you get to this Youth 4 event, I think there's 80 boats.
Yeah.
Right. In the men's and in the girls and boys race individually.
And what is considered youth?
Under 19.
Or 19.
Yeah. So, I mean, they're high school, right? Like they're high school 4s. And there are so many, and they are so many from different parts of the state. I think that to me over the years, I've been doing that for 20 years. I have started to see that it's not all the private schools or the independent schools, but you're starting to see the schools from the more metropolitan, the more urban schools that are bringing 4s to the event. And I have to imagine a huge part of that is CRI. That has helped facilitate that in some way, shape, or form. So
yeah, we're sort of we consider ourselves sort of open source. So people have questions, we'll give them our bylaws, we'll give them our financials, we'll give them whatever. Every organization, just like every kid, right? Like everybody's different. So what works in Boston doesn't work in Missouri. I was on the phone last week with an organization on the West Coast. It's just I think the idea around access and what the role that we play is that, yeah, we were one of the first, sort of public access rowing organizations. And I want to be very clear, not the best, right? So we're just one of the organizations that has really been around for a long time. We've learned a lot. We've failed a ton, made a lot of mistakes, but we've gained a certain amount of wisdom and a certain amount of traction in terms of how we function. And the idea with that is that this city is so special in terms of what the river brings. There was a Red Bull event not long ago on the river with the swimming, endurance swimming event that happened. Here I go talking about endurance sports. I don't know what I'm talking about. But I think the idea is that the role that we can play is like, yeah, we can be a figurehead, but there are a lot of organizations that support this that really want to learn from what it means to be a community partner, and I think that's something that we've got a lot of traction with. So if we can give that's great.
Really cool that you are willing to share your playbook essentially with other groups that are looking to build something similar in other communities.
You know what, man? Like, why not?
Yeah.
Like, okay, so we're a $5 million nonprofit. It's sort of a large gas station is sort of an inside joke, right? Like in rowing, we're really, we're one of the largest programs in the country in North America. But the point is like, if the mission is really growth and the mission is really to be sort of a thought leader for our, maybe not the mission, but our organizational behaviors are to be a thought leader, then we need to model what people need. And whether that's on the water, whether that's for our staff, whether that's for the community, this idea of being in public schools is something that like CRI is super proud of, because there just aren't other organizations that are doing that. But we're not doing it perfectly. And we have a lot to learn by sharing what we do and having people say, well, have you thought about this? Or, hey, we can take a 10th or a 5th or a 3rd or half of what you do, and we can apply it somewhere else. And why wouldn't we do that in sport, especially when we're talking about providing people access to it?
Mm-hmm. So speaking about the high school and indoor, you've got an indoor youth rowing event with 1,000 high schoolers. Did we read that number correctly?
Yeah.
So what is that event?
That's known as chaos. Yeah. Yeah. So it's basically middle school.
Stinky chaos.
Yeah. It's something. So what that is so with the schools that we serve, we invite them to compete against each other. Sports is about competition, and it doesn't matter what. So we run programs for people with disabilities. We run programs for people in the military, vets, current service or former military. And we run programs for people who learn how to row. We run programs for people who come in from a corporate program. Everybody wants to race. It's instinctual. It's like a human, yeah, this is cool, but get me in a fast boat, and I want to rip on it against, the people that are in my team. And it's not a mean thing. It's actually sort of like an enthusiastically sort of like I really want to do this. And so doing that with 1,200 of your closest middle school friends is it's intense. You guys should come down.
Do you have ergs set up for this? What are we doing here?
Yeah,
1,000 meters.
Yeah.
Well, erg. We know acronyms, so you got to explain what an erg is.
Rowing machine.
Erg is a rowing machine.
All right. I'm just saying, we get those questions. We use a lot of VO2 max watts.
Ergometer.
Erg is a horrible machine.
we don't check the lactate millimoles on the kids when they're getting off. Okay. But no, the idea behind this is that it's a relay race for teams of 4 to come, and we put 50 machines this year. In 2025, it's going to be at UMass Boston in their gymnasium. We've been at the track at New Balance. We've been at the Reggie Lewis Center. And we're really, really excited about partnering with UMass Boston around basically the opportunity for kids to just understand a little bit of the team concept, and also the idea of how competition is cooperative. So, everybody knows pretty much what a rowing machine looks like. So imagine racing where you do basically a 90-second hard as you can row. And then you get off, and you guys know about transitions, right? So there's a lot of speed and a lot of time to be gained by transitions. And so getting off a rowing machine when you're exhausted, and having your teammates help you with your shoes and
unstrap your shoes,
to get up and off, and then have that next person get going and keeping the wheel moving. All of that stuff are all the same concepts that people have on the water, and they can apply in a lot of different arenas.
So it's how many meters you can row in 6 minutes?
Yeah.
Nice.
It must be carnage. Right? I'm just thinking how hard these kids must be pulling on that.
Yeah, some of them it's their 6th rowing experience or their 10th rowing experience, and for some of them they've been trained. Some schools come with T-shirts made, and they're they call their middle school the middle school rowing team, and the
so great.
Teachers are into it.
That's awesome.
We do 4 programs for people with disabilities. So we have a para event for kids from schools who have used our program with their programs for kids with disabilities. And really all it is just super fun. Middle schools and, potato sack racing, right? Who knows who's going to win? It could be in who got their feet in the footstraps the fastest, as opposed to who pulled the hard. So we look at basically 2 things, sure. Are there kids with athletic capacity, but who are the kids also that are having a lot of fun? And that's really our measure.
Who can join CRI?
So CRI is not a membership organization, so anybody can come down.
Well, if I want to row in an 8
Yep.
with CRI, how would I go about doing that?
So you would, in your case, speak or sign up for a program for people who are experienced rowers, and basically come down for either, we run programs this way, twice a week, 3 times a week, 4 times a week, 6 times a week. And so for adults, former collegiate rowers, you could learn how to scull, which is rowing with 2 oars, those people in the single sculls that are on the posters and sort of the beautiful sunrises and sunsets in Boston. Or you can sign up for a sweep rowing program, which is people putting using 1 oar, putting both hands on 1 oar. And those are the longer boats like the 8s and the 4s that Eric was talking about earlier. But for adults, we have programs that run basically 4 weeks to learn how to row twice a week, just an easy dose. And then from there, you can join, 3 times a week for 6 weeks. You can join 3 times a week for the whole year. You can join our competitive team and train and,
That's cool.
That's really interesting. That it's not like you said, a membership organization. It's not CRC. It's not Community Rowing Club. Right. So I think that's good for people to know that if they wanted to just come and, like you said, do a 4-week learn to row program, you could do that. But at the same time, you could be surrounded by some other inspiring and incredible athletes from the collegiate side, but also can you elaborate a little bit more on being a national team center as well?
Yeah. So if you think about an organization where anywhere from 1,200 to 2,500 people come through the building in a day from 5 a.m. until 9 p.m. So, somebody coming down at 5 a.m. is going to bump into the Boston College rowing program, our competitive teams, our Learn to Row program in the sweep boats, and also sculling programs. We run a para program during that time too, so you might have to move some prosthetic legs around or work with people who have disabilities, and that pretty much happens through the bookends of the day. And for us, we take pride in the fact that we can teach people how to row, and that U.S. Rowing has trusted us to be a training center. So there are 3 training centers: the Boston Training Center, the one down in Princeton, New Jersey, and then the one in Chula Vista, California. So we see athletes anywhere from 10 days to 10 weeks at a time, where they're directed by U.S. Rowing or where they're working and living. It just depends on where they are in the quad.
It's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Learn to row and national team training, like all within one well-oiled machine. I think that's really cool. If
I could speak to that for just a second. So that's actually, we put a lot of work into that. And so when we talk about sort of like what's the secret sauce of a sport-based community organization, my feeling is it's this formula. It's the individual relationships that people have with each other on their team. So, you guys rowed in college, you keep in touch with the guys that you rowed with. Rowing brings, in our case, the rowing activity brings individuals together. It's kind of like a church or a community center where you just don't know the background or the experience of the people who show up because it's a public access organization. So you create relationships that are cross-socioeconomic, cross-racial, cross-gender, and you enrich your life by having an intimate experience with people on the water. But then you're also part of a community. And so you have to cooperate, sharing boats, sharing dock space, sharing where you put your shoes, sharing parking, and sharing in an organization that actually has a mission to give everybody the same access that you get. And then as part of that also, the final thing is that, our expectation is that people get healthier physically and mentally while they're there. So for us, when we succeed, we provide people really strong individual relationships. They're part of a really strong and vibrant community, and they're coming down and getting healthier and fitter by doing the activity that we offer. And that formula to me is something that really distinguishes organizations that are committed to communities and ones that have a singular focus, say, on fitness or on, like you talk about high performing athletes and some of the groups that are in the endurance world. I think they're already doing all those things. But being explicit about it and saying that's what they're going to do is the thing that actually enables more people to feel like they have access to it too.
So you got my wheel spinning here. You mentioned a corporate program, and I was just thinking, as part of an executive leadership team building program, let's say I had 6 people on my executive team or 7 people or 8, we could actually join a program and all learn how to row together over a period of 6 or 8 weeks. Is that how that works?
45 minutes, man.
What?
Yeah. So we've had everything from, we had the C-suite of actually a major insurance company come down. So the like major corporate people on down to like local nonprofits. We're doing stuff with all kinds of different organizations where, depending on what they want to do, we can teach the team concepts in a pretty concentrated time. We did a program with Disney not long ago where, what's the Boston experience? You get a cup of cold clam chowder, you walk the Liberty Trail, you eat a lobster, you go to Fenway Park and you row, right? Like, and that's actually.
But do you
what we
get
did.
Folks in a boat?
Oh yeah.
Are they in a barge or a boat?
They're in a barge.
They're in a barge. Yeah.
Yeah. But
Which is good. It's smart.
It's safe. Well, and so just so your audience, so there's a difference between sort of a one of those skinny hulls and a catamaran, right? So a catamaran's super safe. You don't have to know how to swim, which is again part of the access. So when we think about organizations that are providing access, we got to think about all the ways that people the barriers of access. The idea of a membership organization is a barrier. Knowing how to swim is a barrier. So we try to reduce those barriers and allow people at least to have the experience to give them the choice. So on a corporate side, you can imagine putting together a group of, we just had a group of, super high powered lawyers come down. There were about 6 to 10 of them. They came down for about 2 hours. They had a little bit of a snack, a little bit of a talk, a little bit of a learn to row, and then they got on the barge and they had a fun time. And, if there are groups of more than, say 15 to 20, those barges can race.
I'm challenging the run clubs that we've spoken to and the bike teams that we've spoken to go down there and experience something different.
Yeah.
Just knowing that you could do it in that block of time. I wouldn't be surprised if you hear from some, because I think that's a really cool
I'd love to.
team building experience.
Yeah,
you can sign up through the website?
Yeah, you just reach the people who run that part of our organization. Lori Lori would be happy to talk to you. But
nice.
Like, just to give you guys an idea, like the Bruins came down and brought their prospects down. And they did a learn to row. Yeah.
Yeah. So we've talked a lot of this, whether people realize it or not. We've been very focused on the Charles here in Boston and in Cambridge, and the Charles River is the holy grail, right? Of, I would say, you've got the Henley.
Yeah.
Over in the UK, and you've got the Charles here in Boston as the best, most iconic rowing location. But there's a lot of great rowing in New England. From your time with races collegiately here in New England, what would be the other little hidden gem, like when you guys would go race there, that you were like, wow, that's a really special spot? I've got one. That was when we went to Dartmouth to compete at Dartmouth. I was sort of mystified by the green and the fog and that river and that experience. So for me, that's one. But what's a hidden gem for you?
So racing is, for a collegiate coach, like racing is dreadful, right? So every place that I ever raced was like, oh my God, I'm coming here. But no, I think that there are a couple really amazing places. So there's an organization, Gentle Giant Rowing, over on the Mystic River. So people don't know there's rowing pretty much there's rowing on Spy Pond in Arlington. There's rowing in Worcester. So a gem for me probably would be either thinking about rowing in some really sort of, what's the right word? Like, unexpected places, like the Mystic River. Or out in Quinsigamond. For me, I have a tradition of how I get to Quinsigamond. I've been, no longer, but went there a lot. And that lake is just beautiful. It's a state park. It's right by UMass Medical Center. And it's just a beautiful.
Yeah, there's a bit of magic on that lake, I think.
Yeah.
Well, for those that don't realize, that's where the New England Championships have always been held. And you had, I think you had IRAs there, or Eastern Springs. I mean, it is... Yeah. Despite being in the middle of Worcester or what have you, it is a beautiful stretch of water that you have there. So I definitely have some fond memories and some not fond memories.
The other place, there's the Neponset River is another place where there's Milton High School rows down there. But Neponset is great. There's a lot of rowing on the South Shore. If people are interested, there's the Hingham. There's rowing in Hingham. There's rowing in Duxbury. So So for your listening audience, the idea that rowing is only accessible in the hub of rowing is really, it's something that if people reach us, we'll be able to direct you to where
there's rowing up by me on Chabaco Lake in Hamilton, Massachusetts.
Right.
I think it has a 1,200 meter straight way, and then a curve. So I don't know how good, but then those boats from Gordon College or St. John's Prep or what have you are at the head of the Charles. So
that's it.
I do think if people wanted to row, CRI is a great inspiration to do it in Boston, but maybe a catalyst that there's a lot of other places where people could learn to row outside downtown.
Absolutely.
Outside downtown Boston.
Absolutely.
Ted, looking ahead, what excites you most about the future of the New England rowing scene?
I think that it's expanding, right? So the number of programs for young people has grown over the past 5 years rapidly. The Arlington Belmont crew just started up. They, every rowing organization goes through its growing pains. So it's not that, but it's just I'm forgetting the name of the other one that's local here, but I think the idea that rowing, CrossFit did a lot for rowing in terms of rowing on the machine. There's a lot of interest in indoor rowing that is spurring interest to do it outside. So a lot of people who come to us have said, like, I've either heard about it or I've seen it. I've seen rowing in some of the weirdest places, like Logan Airport has this amazing display of rowing in Boston in I think it's terminal D, C or E or something like that. There's a whole wall of rowing and a testimony at the head of the Charles. No. Wow. If you just keep an eye out, like rowing is popping up. I was watching a TV show last night and there was, rowing just flashed by, people in a boat. Boys in the Boat did a lot for the sport in terms of raising people's awareness, but I think the future is bright for rowing in terms of not just what we were talking about before in terms of the high performance, sort of the toil of the sport, but the access that people feel to it is through, all kinds of different rowing machines and then all kinds of organizations. There's an organization in Brookline called Power Rowing that just does rowing on rowing machines as part of training. Row Studios, Row House, like there's a lot of businesses that are popping up that do rowing, teach people rowing. CrossFit's done a lot to learn how to actually, a couple CrossFit organizations here have used us to help us teach them how to coach rowing. That's our snobbery about the sport, right? It's like one of the most fullest body sports that burn more calories rowing than any other sport, I think. So
my local gym just went from 2 ergs to 4.
Yeah.
And they're always being used.
Yeah.
Not for a long periods of time, maybe a 10-minute, 15-minute row. I have to hold myself back when I see folks, not doing the right technique. Yeah. I want to go up and say, hey, I can help you with your back. Your back won't hurt tomorrow.
Yeah. And as rowers, we sort of carry that stigma, right? Just to give you guys a sense, like 2 million people row a day in the United States, and there are 100,000 members of U.S. rowing. So as we think about like what rowing is to people, it's not what the three of us sitting here have experienced. There's so much more that people think about the sport. And what you said is exactly right. Like, geez, I have this like idea that I have to be on the machine for like 45 minutes and be exhausted when I'm done. And I get exhausted after 5 to 10 minutes, right? So like,
me too.
I'm with that group that just, rows for like 10 minutes and gets off. But that's rowing, and that's, during COVID, we couldn't get people on the water, and, we did all kinds of videos and tried to keep our community connected. And one of the things we said was like, if you're rowing on a machine, you're rowing. And I think that's just it's an idiom that I've held on to.
That's pretty awesome. Well, Ted, this is our last question. I know you're from Virginia, I believe you said, but you've been in New England now, maybe more than half of your life. I'm not really sure.
Yeah.
Tell us why you agree that New England is the greatest endurance region in the United States, if not the world.
3 reasons: terrain and availability of resources for people to participate in endurance sports across different modalities in some of the most amazing parts of our world.
Yes. Check.
Right?
Number 2, I would say what you guys are doing and what other organizations are doing in terms of connecting endurance sports to communities.
Yes.
High five.
Top shelf, right? And I think number 3 is that, Boston has an identity that is rooted in the idea that people who come here are whole. And like Boston really, like if you're from Boston, like this is the crux of our country, like, the Revolutionary War and all this stuff. There's all this history about Boston. And so one of the things about sports in Boston is that people tie it directly to the identity of who we are as a community. And given the variety of endurance sports that are in this area, we're not a football town necessarily. We're not a baseball town, or we're not a hockey town. We're all of those things. And then there's all this other stuff that is happening. And from my perspective, like the idea of considering what Boston offers and what New England offers for endurance athletes, I think is really, really special. And something that Bostonians should take a lot of pride in.
That's one of the best answers I've ever heard.
So good. So good. That he probably got that sort of eloquence from his time working at Boston College and not at Tufts. I'm just to be clear, I think.
Or MIT or Northeastern.
Or MIT or Northeastern, but probably Boston College.
Yeah.
Ted, before we close out, is there anything else you'd like to mention to our audience about CRI?
If people are interested, everything happens at the human level, and I think if people have a question, a lot of times they're a little nervous about asking because of their sense that there's other things that are happening that are more important. And I think kind of like what we were talking about with kids, like this happens one person at a time. So if somebody has a question, whether it's joining a running club or joining a rowing organization or joining, a swimming organization or a biking organization, like the first thing is just to call up and say, I don't know anything about this. What can you tell me? And if people are interested about it, just to give us a shout.
And if I could, so for any folks that are down by the river, walking along the Charles or what have you, tell us a little bit about the blades so they can identify the iconic, red and white blades of CRI. So what should they look for to identify a CRI boat?
So to give you a sense, CRI, we have the largest fleet of rowing shells in America.
How many?
We have 105 boats. Wow. They're all red. And the reason they're all red is that doesn't distinguish good boats from bad boats and fast boats from slow boats. And the same thing goes for our blades. So our rowing, the oars are painted with a red with a white stripe with our little iconic black wave on it. But if you see a red boat out there with red blades, that's likely a CRI boat.
That's great. I think people will now, having listened to this, as they're running or biking along the Charles, look over and be like, oh, that's a CRI boat. Yeah. So I wanted to make sure that people knew what they were looking for.
Great question, Eric. Thank you. I think that's a good way to close out this episode here. So Ted, thank you so much for being on the New England Endurance Podcast and sharing your story about CRI and what you guys are doing over there in the rowing community and making it more inclusive. It sounds like an amazing organization, awesome journey you've been on, and I thank you for that personally.
Thanks, Art.
Yeah, for those that want to learn more about CRI, they can head to communityrowing.org. We'll also tag them on our Instagram page at New England Endurance. And also got to say a big thank you to our sponsors who power this podcast. You've got Lark Fine Foods, a 100% women-owned specialty food company baking delicious small batch cookies. The Everyday Athlete, a book about balancing work, family, and fitness, written by a former rower from Tufts. And Kinetic, experience the brain-boosting benefits of ketones on demand at drinkkinetic.com. So until next time, get out there, rain or shine, explore the beautiful terrain and rivers of New England.